What's happening? Thanks for joining me on this hump day morning. I always appreciate every single one of you. We'll get to the C's, we'll get to the B's, we'll get to Elliot Wolf's future. But first, a quick update on Wolf's latest move. The Patriots yesterday signed outside linebacker edge O'Shane Ximines. Now, I actually am aware of who this is because when I was down in Virginia, Ximines played for ODU for their football program. I have a soft spot for Ximines, but I do like this signing for depth purposes. He's 6'4", 254 pounds. He was a third-round draft pick by the Giants in 2019. He played more than 500 snaps back in 2022. He only played 3 games last year in 23, but he has a link to your new outside linebackers coach, Drew Wilkins. So you would imagine Eliot Wolf and company got some good information from Wilkins about Ximines and what he can bring to the table. Wilkins obviously spoke well enough about the young man to give him a shot on this roster. He gives you some pass rush depth, which I think is important. We've talked about edge. We thought maybe the Patriots would use one of those later picks in the draft on an edge. Instead, they signed Ximines. One thing about him, though, he did struggle to set the edge. So he is more of a rotational pass rusher. He's a guy that will come in for a few snaps, get after the quarterback, but he's not going to be somebody who you play a ton of snaps with and expect him to set that edge on the outside. It's just not going to happen. But instead of drafting a young edge, somebody that might be the rotational pass rusher for at least a few snaps a week, you now have that option in Ximines. And this is purely a bet on DeMarcus Covington, who's done a tremendous job improving and developing the defensive line, guys like Christian Barmore, and the list goes on. We've gone through them. We've talked about them, Anthony Jennings and others. But DeMarcus Covington has done a very, very good job developing defensive linemen, so maybe he gets his hands on him, and you see Ximines improve a little bit. You still have Wilkins, and you have Jerry Montgomery. Jeez, butchering names on this Wednesday. So you've got Wilkins and you've got Jerry Montgomery all going to be working with Ximines. And this is just, as I see Kookaburra point out in the chat, it's all about competition. This is more competition at outside linebacker, more competition at the edge position. Hopefully I pronounce this correctly. Gogan Intermediaries says, Nick, greetings from Norway. Thank you. I love the greetings from all around the world. I appreciate you. Stephen Coakley says that he lived close there in Ghent. Ghent is a great area down in Norfolk. Norfolk is right near ODU. ODU is in Norfolk. Ghent is near ODU. It's a great little spot. Great places to live. Few nice bars there. So hello, Stephen. I appreciate you joining us from Ghent, or at least formerly of Ghent, and joining us this morning. All right, so I like the addition of Ximines. Nothing huge, nothing big. I'm not telling you he's an impact kind of game changer, but I like the idea of bringing somebody in who is a former third-round pick, has played snaps at a high level there at New York with the over 500 snaps back in 2022, and he addresses some of the depth issues that you might have at edge outside linebacker. So I like the swing at Ximines. We'll see if he makes the team. I think it makes a lot of sense. All right, let's get to Elliot Wolf. Before I get to him and whether or not he has earned a contract with the Patriots by what he's done over the past few months, I want to remind you to give us that like. Every thumbs up means an awful lot in the YouTube world, so make sure you click that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. We are nearing 3,200 subscriptions. We're trying to hit 3,500. That is our next goal. So like, subscribe. Also, rate and review Spotify and Apple Pods. We talked about Wolf and the fact that going back a few weeks ago, there was a story that surfaced that he was a lame duck de facto GM. In the last year of his deal is coming up reportedly within the next few weeks. Not only was Wolf a lame duck de facto GM, but the rest of this front office, the vast majority of those people are also coming towards the end of their deals. So now the decision has to be made. If you're Robert Kraft, you're the Patriots, you have to make this decision on whether or not Elliot Wolf has done a good enough job to earn a contract, to earn the opportunity to continue to build this football team. Have you seen enough? If you're Robert Kraft, I ask all of you, have you seen enough from Elliot Wolf to hand him a brand new contract. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if anything that Wolf has done this offseason will work. We never have an idea. Whether it's a first-year GM, de facto GM, a GM that's on the job for the 10th season, we never have a clear idea. We just never have that clear idea whether or not each and every decision is going to work. We can imagine that there are going to be a few decisions that don't work. There will be decisions that will work, and you just hope that there are more that work than not work. That is how football goes. So nothing that has been done this offseason is a guarantee. We all have to appreciate that, acknowledge that, and even embrace it. But unfortunately, the way that this has been set up, and the fact that Wolf, his contract is coming up in the next few weeks, the decision has to be made now. You can't wait to see whether or not the moves work. And that's part of the risk that Kraft and company took by allowing the front office to walk into this offseason with a bunch of expiring contracts. You took the risk. We said this going back weeks ago. How in the world can you evaluate Wolf's draft within a month of Wolf's draft? It's impossible to do, but you have put yourself in a position that you've got to make this call. It is yes or no on Wolf. You're either out or in, because if you're out, then you start talking to other people. You go through the interview process, and you might change. You might pivot to somebody else, right? So you've got to make that call right now in the moment, which is why it was so difficult to imagine walking in with a bunch of expiring contracts and having enough time to evaluate what these guys have done. I have a couple of questions before we get into what Wolf has done that I think's been pretty damn good. We do have questions. It would be disingenuous to sit here on this Wednesday and act like Elliot Wolf has answered all the questions on this roster. Act as if this is a flawless construction of a football team. The first question we have is left tackle. To me, it's the biggest question. Can Caden Wallace, can Chuck Okorafor play left tackle? I'm not excited about going into camp with a guy that hasn't played more than a handful of snaps on the left side in the NFL and Chuck Okorafor. I'm not super excited about Wallace, who has played nothing but the right side in college. Can he transition to left tackle? I am not excited about that. I have major concerns about the left tackle position. So I'm not going to sit here and act as if they have perfectly addressed that spot. Now, they would argue they've addressed it because Wolf and this coaching staff, they believe Wallace can move to the left side. They believe Okorafor can move to the left side. They're the coaches. They know a lot. They know a lot more about tackle play than I would ever know. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're wrong on that assessment, that their evaluation is going to prove fruitless in this venture. But I'm not also going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, this is easy. Okorafor, left tackle. Wallace, backup left tackle. Easy peasy. Not going to say that. They have to nail this evaluation. They have to be right about at least one of those two guys. When we get to camp, Okorafor can't be losing himself on the left side. Wallace can't look lost on the left side. But right now, if you ask me, I am not overly optimistic about left tackle. Big question mark. Wide receiver number one. My question, in hindsight, looking at how everything unfolded at the wide receiver position, would you have been better trading a fourth-round pick for Keenan Allen? Now, I thought they should have made that deal going back months ago. I thought it made sense. It wasn't a huge ask. Allen is a proven number one wide receiver. He's been incredibly productive. He was incredibly productive last year. So I would have made that deal. But now, when you look at how things have unfolded, are you better with Javon Baker and Layden Robinson long-term versus Allen? The biggest argument for Allen was bring a guy in to be wide receiver one for your rookie quarterback. Now we know that rookie quarterback is Drake May. And by the way, happy May Day, May 1st. Now we know that May's the guy. And we also know that May I wouldn't say it's likely just yet, but it's at least possible that May is not going to start week 1. So if you look at this, it's really about the long term and not necessarily about 2024. If you drafted somebody and you planned on starting that guy right away, and maybe that's what ends up happening because Drake May knocks their socks off during camp in the preseason. But right now, I don't think that's the plan. The plan is to relax a little bit, give May time to develop, to work on all of the mechanic stuff that we talked about, and then address it as to middle of the season. Where's this guy at? Is he ready to go? So if you're looking at May, though, you've got to believe that it might take him a little time to get on the field, which means urgency at wide receiver 1 isn't necessarily as high as it was if you drafted somebody like Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or Bo Nix, really any of the other quarterbacks in that top 6. If you drafted one of those guys, maybe not J.J. McCarthy because he's younger than May, but I would imagine McCarthy is going to start right away in Minnesota because of how that team is constructed and what's built around him. But if you drafted any other quarterback in the top 6, you might sit back and say to yourself, Keenan Allen would make more sense because he was an immediate need, an immediate help for the young quarterback. Now it's not necessarily the case with Drake May. So long-term, are you better with Robinson and Javon Baker than you are with Keenan Allen? The other question that you have is Cole Strange. If Cole Strange is injured, which he is, and if he's not able to get back by week 1, and I think that's a major question mark at this point, then you needed to draft a guard. You needed to draft somebody because Antonio Mafi's not ready. You could have Leverett, but you needed depth. You needed another guard. You got City So, you've got Leverett. You needed somebody else if Strange is not ready. Jake Andrews looks like a center. Again, Mafi is a project. He's not ready, so you needed another guard. The problem really is the Patriots had so many holes offensively to fill that it was always going to be a very difficult task to fill them all in one offseason, at least adequately. And we talked about this idea of the rebuild. Well, some thought that, hey, it'd be a 1-year rebuild. You can do this. You go out and you sign a wide receiver, you draft a left tackle and a quarterback, and bing, bang, boom, things are simple. No, it's not how it works. That's why I've said from the beginning, this is at least a 2 or 3 year process. Defensively, they're in a good spot for this year. They have a lot of free agents coming up next year on that side of the football. But for right now, when you look at it in a vacuum, defensively, you can sit there and maybe quibble about free safety. Maybe you want somebody else that's more experienced at outside corner opposite of Gonzalez. But, excuse me, when you compare defense and offense, offense is easily the side of the ball that they needed to rebuild. And it was going to take a couple of years to fully rebuild this thing, and that's if you do it right. I also would not eliminate the idea of trading for a wide receiver. I think that is still possible. Am I telling you that it is probable? Of course not. I'm not telling you that it's probable, but it's still possible. Patriots are going to look at what they see and what they have there at wide receiver during camp. All the young guys, how are they working out? And then you have to also pay attention to the negotiations. These veteran wide receivers. Does T. Higgins get the deal that he wants? Does Ayuk get the deal that he wants? Does Cortland Sutton get a deal that he wants? What happens with Dallas and CeeDee Lamb? What happens with Jaden Waddle and Miami? Money talks. So those deals, I would not rule them out completely. Deebo Samuel. Now that you have Javon Baker as an X, Deebo makes more sense. So I would not rule out the possibility of trading for a veteran wide receiver 1. Because those conversations are going to continue with those teams and those players. And if Ayuk does not get the contract that he wants, then he's going to continue to be angry, and they're going to have to get him out of there. If Ayuk signs a big contract and they look at all the money on the books, they might come to the conclusion, we have to get Deebo out of here. We can't pay all of that money to Ayuk and Deebo. We can't do it. Can't do it, won't do it. How much of a problem does T. Higgins cause? Does he show up to camp? Does he become a distraction? Same thing with Cortland Sutton. Same thing with CeeDee Lamb. So that is still on the table. Don't think it's probable, but it's at least possible and something that we have to keep in the back of our minds. So this was not a perfect offseason so far. I got a serious question about left tackle. They better nail those evaluations. Wide receiver 1, a little less concerned by after the draft. Not to say that they have a bona fide number 1 guy at the NFL level, but at least they have somebody they can play at X and Baker. They brought in Jalen Polk, who I think is going to be productive from day one, and the pieces fit. So at least you have that. With all of that said, you've got to make the decision right now on Elliot Wolf's contract situation. And if I were Robert Kraft, I would give Elliot Wolf his deal. I would allow him to continue to run the football operations because he has done more than enough to me to warrant more time to continue to rebuild this offense and to solidify for the long term the defense. We went through it. I'll just mention it quickly. I thought it was a sensible draft. Did he nail everything? No, he didn't. And as a matter of fact, my draft grade was lower than a lot of other people's. I gave the Patriots a B. If you look around locally, you look around nationally, a lot of B pluses, a lot of A minuses, a lot of A's. I saw a few A pluses for this draft. I wasn't as high as others on the draft, but I thought the draft made sense. It made a lot of sense to me. And I like a number of the players that they picked, and I loved the Drake May pick at number 3. So I thought it was a sensible draft. I don't look at that draft and say, oh man, Wolf swung and missed big time. Some of you might say that. I certainly don't say that. I like the re-signings of the core foundation pieces we've talked about. Kyle Duggar, a little too rich, but hey, I'm not going to go crazy over a couple of $1 million when you have so much cap space. So they keep Kyle Duggar. They keep Michael Wenu, which I think was pivotal given the state of this offensive line. Could you imagine what we're talking about regarding this O-line if Michael Wenu wasn't part of things right now? Had to bring him back with how this all unfolded. Christian Barmore talked about it earlier this week. Thought that was a tremendous extension. And when you look at the details of the deal, it's really team friendly. When you compare it to other defensive tackle contracts this offseason, the Patriots can get out of that deal within the next 2 years. So the Barmore signing extension, I think, was a really good bit of business by Wolf. Really no head-scratching free agency moves. Now, you might not agree with everything that they did. You might have wanted them to do more. But when you look at the signings, which signing would bother you to the core? Which signing would you say was a quote-unquote bad signing? Antonio Gibson, Hunter Henry coming back, Okorafor, Brissett, Taki, Uche coming back, Hooper, Jennings coming back, Armon Watts to fill in Lawrence Guy's spot. Again, Nick Leverett, the steady offensive guard veteran, that 1-year deal. KJ Osborne, and special teams / strong safety Jalen Hawkins for some competition. Like, I don't have a problem with any of those deals. None of those deals I sit there and go, oh my God, that's a waste of money. What are they going to do with that guy? None of them. And the loan overpay, again, was Duggar, which at the end of the day is not a terrible idea. It's not a terrible thing to take care of your own guy. They think he's going to be a playmaker. Again, they've got to keep him close to the line of scrimmage this year. Don't mess around with his role. Get him back to what he does best. So, sensible draft. Great job re-signing your core foundational pieces. No head-scratching free agency moves. To me, that means Wolf should get his contract. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to rate and review. Something else about Wolf that's obvious. He believes in offense. Thank the good Lord. He believes in offense. He believes in the idea of building the offense right, needing weapons, guys that can actually do some really cool things on the field on that side of the ball. So I love the idea of having a GM who believes in offense, understands that building an offense in 2024 should be a top priority instead of something on the back shelf. Not walk into a draft when you need offensive help and start by drafting 3 defensive players and then drafting 3 interior offensive linemen later in the draft. That's what we went through last year, as we all know. This is somebody who respects offense and is trying to build this offense. It's also obvious that Wolf believes in supporting the young quarterback. I don't think you look at what happened with Mac Jones and say the same thing about Bill Belichick, especially in 22 and 23. You can't look at those moves. You can't look at them getting cheap with Jacoby Myers, getting cheap with DeAndre Hopkins, not addressing tackle whatsoever in last year's draft. You can't look at that and say that they respected the quarterback position and did everything they could to make that quarterback better or to support that quarterback. From the early moves that Wolf has pulled off, it's clear that they believe they've got to do a much better job at supporting this young quarterback than they did the last young quarterback. And he's got the resume. Wolf has the resume, pedigree, reputation. He's got relationships. He can network. And maybe most importantly, he has a fantastic relationship with Gerard Mayo. And if Mayo is your guy in the long term, and obviously that's how Robert Kraft feels, if you're standing by Mayo and you're going to give Gerard Mayo a legitimate opportunity over the next 2 or 3 years to rebuild this thing and get it back on the tracks, then you've got to keep a guy in the GM spot that Mayo trusts, believes in, and get along with. And that's what we see between Wolf and Mayo. All right. I have some information on what the Patriots turned down for the number 3 pick. My thoughts on those reported offers in just a minute. But first, the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land. They've got paintball. They've got airsoft. They've got kid versions of paintball and airsoft, something for every age group starting at 6+. You show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They take care of the rest. Low-key, casual, fantastic staff. 4.9 star rating online. If you enjoy paintball and airsoft, if you want to try it out for the first time, check out Warzone Paintball and Airsoft in North Kingston, Rhode Island. You can give them a call at 401-228-6366. That's 401-228-6366. Tell them the Nick Cattle Show sent you. So I would give Wolf that contract. I would give him a brand new contract. All right, let's jump to the trade offers, and then we'll get to Celtics and Bruins to wrap things up. There was a ton of pre-draft trade talk. I mean, we went through how many different episodes of this podcast breaking down the rumors. I can't even count that high at this point. We went through every single possible scenario, whether it was Vegas, whether it was Denver, whether it was Minnesota, whether it was the Giants. Well, now we have reports about what was actually offered to the Patriots. And it's obvious after reading these reports why the Patriots continued to leak out that they were looking for a Godfather offer. We had said it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this stuff out, but we had said all the talk about they haven't been offered enough. They want more. They're looking for more. Nobody has offered the quote-unquote bag. It was obvious the Patriots were getting that out there to the world because they were letting teams like the Vikings and Giants know what you have on the table is not nearly good enough for us to trade this 3rd pick. And when you read about these offers, I would agree with the Patriots that these offers were nowhere nearly good enough to give up that 3rd pick. Mike Reese reports that Minnesota offered 11-23 in next year's 1st-round pick for 3 and 2 mid-round picks. Now, let me get this straight. So Minnesota wanted you to swap 3 and 11. So you were going to drop from 3 to 11. You were going to get the 23rd pick. You were going to get next year's 1st-round pick, but you also had to give up multiple mid-round picks. What are we doing here? That's a waste of time. So let's give you an example. You would trade 3 in what? Your 4th-round pick and maybe a pick next year for 11-23 in next year's 1st? That's an outrageous offer in a bad way. That's a terrible offer. Not nearly enough. We were talking about 11-23 next year's 1st in a legit player like Christian Darrisaw for number 3 in maybe a mid-round pick next year. That offer's a joke. There's no way I pulled the trigger on that trade. That is not even close to enough value if you're trading the 3rd pick, and especially when you know the Vikings are moving up because they love Drake May. Give me a break with that. Now, Burt Breer, he reported that Minnesota offered 11, 23, and a 2025 first for the 3rd pick in quote-unquote favorable swaps. So Burt Breer's version of the offer is 11, 23 in next year's first for your 3, and then you would swap picks. And the picks that you were swapping were going to be favorable to Minnesota. Again, what the hell are we doing? It sounds to me like the Vikings were trying to fleece Elliot Wolf and the Patriots. Those offers, they don't even really get me to have a conversation with Minnesota. As soon as I hear that offer, I'm hanging up the phone. That's not enough. Not enough. Same thing with the Giants. We talked about a possible Giants offer. Swapping, going from 3 to 6, right? What did we want? We wanted, if I remember correctly, number 6, a 2nd-round pick this year, maybe a 3rd-round pick this year, and next year's first. I would have seriously entertained that offer if I didn't love Drake May. I said it time and time again. If you offered the swap from 3 to 6 to go along with, I think it was like 49, 70 in this year's draft, and next year's 1st-round pick, I would have that conversation with the Giants. Well, apparently, according to both Burt Breer and Mike Reese, the Giants offered a 2025 1st-round pick. That was it. We're not counting 6. It's a pick swap. So, in essence, the Patriots had to make a decision on whether or not, if they were sticking with the quarterback, did they believe that J.J. McCarthy in a 2025 1st-round pick was worth more than Drake May. And in their estimation, evaluation, and assessment, they decided that was not the case. They were going to stand by Drake. And when you look at those offers, again, to me, Drake May was the clear option. The clear option. I did not think J.J. McCarthy was worth a top 10 pick. I said that consistently. He ended up finishing at number 10 after the trade by Minnesota on draft night. I would not have picked J.J. McCarthy. I just would not have done it that high at 3. I had no interest in that. But the Giants, to me, if you really wanted to hand over the quote-unquote bag, you're adding more picks than just next year's 1st-round pick. You're adding this year's 2nd, this year's 3rd, and then next year's 1st. That's an offer that we can have a conversation about. May was clear. May was clearly option 1. And I'm glad the Patriots made the decision that they made. I think they made the right move by sticking and picking Drake May after reading those reports about what offers were on the table. If we're talking about the Vikings offering Darrisaw, Jefferson, or the Giants offering more picks, then I might have a different conclusion to that and say, well, maybe they should have entertained it. I don't even entertain those deals. No, thank you. And if they love Drake May, and they have said they love Drake May, then sticking and picking was always option number 1. It's what they should have done. Don't forget to like and subscribe. All the thumbs up mean the world to us. Appreciate every single like that we get here on YouTube. Rate and review. Always fantastic to see the ratings and the reviews at Spotify and Apple Pods. And don't forget our Patreon channel. I had a chat last night before the Bruins game with all the members. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. I'm going to have a podcast tonight. We're going to dive into Drake May a little bit more and how the Patriots need to handle him as far as a coaching staff. And you get every single pod that we do here. You get it ad-free at the Patreon page. People love that option. So again, patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES, $5 a month. Allen jumps in. So Wolf middled it. Should have traded number 34 and 68 for a better left tackle. Well, again, you weren't going to fill every hole. If you trade 34 and 68, then you don't get your receiver. You get Javon Baker in the 4th round. At that point, you don't know if Baker's going to be there. You have no clue. You have no clue. And I would also say that, if you're trying to creep back into the 1st round, and the Patriots were trying to creep back into the 1st round, but they were trying to creep back for a wide receiver, that tells us that they're comfortable with Okorafor, and they ended up getting Wallace. Now, if they flame out Allen, of course we look back and say, they should have done more to get a left tackle figured out, whether that's signing a bridge left tackle that I have talked about, Charles Leno, somebody like that. Mekhi Becton signed with the Eagles, so he's off the market. Then, of course, we can look back and say they screwed up left tackle. But I'm not an offensive line play guru. I can't sit here and tell you if Okorafor has no chance of playing on the left side. I can't tell you that Caden Wallace can't transition to the left side. That's up to the coaches. If you're trading 34 and 68 for a tackle, you have to hit on that tackle. That tackle pretty much has to play immediately. And we also have to recognize that you're not getting that 2nd round wide receiver. Now, that's a debate. I don't have an issue what they did if Wallace works out or Okorafor works out. They need one of those two guys to be good enough to play on that side of the offensive line. If they're not, then it's a big swing and a miss. But the Patriots had so many holes to address. I think a lot of people, they took for granted. They took for granted how many different spots on this offense that needed to be figured out. And we weren't even talking about Cole Strange. We weren't aware of Cole Strange's situation until going back, I don't know what, a couple months ago. When we first started to look at this roster, we said, all right, well, you'll have Strange at left guard, you'll have Andrews in the center, and you'll have either So or Owenu at right guard. And we were looking at right tackle, left tackle. Well, they're moving Owenu to right tackle. They're keeping So at right guard. Andrews is your center. But they still needed to take care of left tackle. They needed to take care of guard depth and maybe even draft for a starting guard with Strange's situation now. You needed to really revamp that wide receiver room, including getting a number 1, or at least attempt to try to get a number 1. Remember, they had 0 tight ends on this roster when the season ended outside of LaMichael Petway. They had 1 running back in Ramondre Stevenson. They had no quarterbacks to speak of because we knew Mac Jones was gone. So that's a lot. And we were bound to have some questions heading into camp. Not everything was going to be addressed as perfectly as we wanted it to be. But they've got to hit on Wallace or Okorafor. It's as simple as that. Wide receiver 1, we'll see if they pull off one of those deals with one of those guys. If the contract negotiations don't work out, I will say they at least have an outside true X receiver in Javon Baker. They have pieces now. But of course, it'll come down to the evaluation, the development of these players to see if the draft works out and if some of these free agency decisions worked out. All right, some quick thoughts on the Celtics and Bruins. So Kristaps Porzingis is out tonight with a strained right soleus. That's a lower calf muscle. If you were wondering, that is the same muscle that Giannis strained against the Celtics going back on April 9th, and Giannis still not back playing just yet. Adam Himmelsbach last night posted that he was told by several sources that the lack of a definitive timeline for Porzingis' return was due to the fact that the team just doesn't know yet. I didn't get this part. They'll be cautious and see how he responds to treatment, but no one is viewing this as a season-ending injury. I didn't understand that at all. I don't understand that part of the tweet because we don't know when the season's going to end. You don't have a definitive timeline on Porzingis, and you don't know when the season is going to end because you're in the playoffs right now. So how do we know? How do we know if this is season ending or not? Let's say worst case scenario plays out and the Celtics lose 3 straight games to Miami. Don't think that's going to happen. I think they win tonight and they move on. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you lose 3 straight to Miami. Your season's over. So how in the world can you say it's not season ending? If Porzingis doesn't come back by game 7 of this series, then yes, his injury was season ending. So I didn't quite understand the second part of the tweet. It's good news that it's not an Achilles, but we'll see. I mean, if the sources that spoke with Himmelsbach believe the Celtics are going to get to the NBA Finals without Kristaps Porzingis, then all this tells us is that the Celtics feel like Porzingis could be back by June. Okay. Again, it's good news that it's not an Achilles, but I have no idea how you can make that next leap and say it's not season ending when we have no idea when their season is going to end. It all depends on the severity. Giannis has been out since April 9th. It sounds like that was a grade 2 strain, which usually takes 3 to 6 weeks. If Porzingis has a grade 2, he's going to be out 3 to 6 weeks. If it's a grade 1, maybe we talk about 2 to 3 weeks instead. Can they get to the Eastern Conference Finals? Yes. They can still get to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's the same team as last year right now without Porzingis. It's the same team as last year. You replace Marcus Smart with Drew Holiday. You have a much better Derek White. You still have Pritchard. You still have Hauser. You still have Horford. This team can still get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I would even say this team could get to the finals without Porzingis. What they need is Tatum and Brown to play great basketball. If they want to get to the finals, they need their Supermax studs to play like Supermax studs. They can't shoot a combined 37.5% like they did the other night in Miami. If you have performances like that stacked together, then you're going to be in trouble. But this team can absolutely This team can absolutely still make a run to the finals without Porzingis. Sports aptitude, season ending is always a reference to the length of the season. Yeah, but the regular season is over. So are we talking about, like, to me, that's like taking it for granted. Right? I mean, it's like taking it for granted by saying it's not a season-ending injury. Well, if this season is done in a week or two, then it was a season-ending injury. So that means the Celtics are looking forward to the finals. If that's the case, then fine, I understand the tweet. But I would not be looking forward to the finals. To me, the season is this series right now. So I understand it if you're looking at it from the lens of they get to the finals, it's not season ending because Porzingis could be back by June. But you've got, 3 playoff series to get through before you get to the finals. So I just think it's almost taking it for granted that they're going to get there. I don't love that idea. I would have just said, look, we don't have a definitive timeline. We're hopeful that he gets back at some point in this playoffs. If we're fortunate enough to continue to play. All right. So I still think they can get to the finals without KP. Much easier with KP, but I still think they can get there without him. Let's talk Bruins for a couple of minutes. Brutal loss last night. The first 30 minutes of that game, the first 30 minutes of that hockey game, I thought last night, the Bruins were in first gear. The Leafs were in fifth. The Leafs came out like the desperate team, like we all expected them to come out like. No Matthews, didn't matter. They came out humming. And the Bruins were flat. They were flat for the first 30 minutes. They got dominated at the dot. Face-offs were an issue. They lost 80%, if not more than that, of the face-offs in the first period. Absolutely freaking brutal. Nobody could win at the dot last night consistently. Nobody. And I thought, the Bruins played on their heels. They played tentative. They played on their heels. They were unsure of themselves. We talk about tape to tape, D to D, those kinds of passes in your defensive zone, especially in the neutral zone. And the Bruins could not make these short, easy passes to each other. They were gripping the stick too hard. They looked nervous. They looked tentative. They looked like they were afraid of losing. And they lost. The first 30 minutes hurt them bad. Now, they were fortunate to still be alive to push this into overtime. And that was because their penalty kill was great. Swayman was once again awesome. They got that lucky bounce. It was a good forecheck by Boquist, but they got a really nice fortunate bounce to Frederick to get that first goal. So they were incredibly fortunate to get that game to overtime last night. They did not play well enough. They could have been down 2 or 3 goals by the third period because of the first 30 minutes. Now, I will say the Bruins came out buzzing for overtime. If the Bruins came out in the first period like they came out for that overtime last night, then I think we might have had a much, much different game. A much different game. So we're sitting here and we're looking at this saying to ourselves, why did they not come out in the first period in front of the home crowd in an elimination game, a chance to end that series? Florida is sitting at home waiting for you. You had a chance to end that series last night. Why did you not have the urgency at the puck drop at the beginning of the game that you had at the beginning of overtime? They were buzzing. But of course, Grzelcyk gets beat, bull rushed by Tavares. Nyes gets the game-winning goal. And I absolutely think that you could look back at the decisions that were made by Coach Montgomery last night to put Grzelcyk in for Shattenkirk. And I'm not telling you that Shattenkirk was any great shakes, but Grzelcyk, he's long been a problem in the postseason. You look at what he did last night, right away in the first period, he had 3 or 4 bad turnovers. He got bull rushed in the overtime. So replacing Shattenkirk with Grzelcyk, not the best idea in the world. It also, I thought, hurt your power play. Your power play had finally gotten back on the tracks. Shattenkirk helped that. Now you take Shattenkirk out of the power play, and it got a little clunky last night. You only had 1 power play, and it was pretty much a useless power play. And I'm not sure why you make any changes after the last couple of games. In Toronto, your team was playing great hockey. Just keep it as is. Don't overcoach this. Brazzer's in for Beecher. Now, I know, Beecher, again, wasn't necessarily playing great hockey, but before game 4, Beecher was doing a pretty damn good job on faceoffs. He was one of your better faceoff guys that you had at your disposal. And now you take him out, and last night, what do we see? Absolutely awful at the dot. Brazeau's also slower than Beecher, and you're going against a hopped-up Toronto with just crazy urgency. I wonder if Montgomery is going to start Allmark Game 5. Scratch that, Game 6. Will we see that happen? Tomorrow night, Game 6 in Toronto. Montgomery talked about the rotation. That's what we do. I just have to wonder now, even though Swayman has been awesome against Toronto all year, he's been terrific in this series. I just have this feeling that Montgomery is going to go back to Allmark for Game 6. Allmark is going to be a little bit leaky, and we will see a Game 7 back here in Boston. I would stick with Swayman. I would still play Swayman. He's been way too good to sit. He is on a heater right now. His confidence is through the freaking roof. He can give you that run. So I would start Swayman again tomorrow night, but I got the feeling that Montgomery will roll with Allmark. I would sit Grzelcyk, but that is dependent on Brandon Carlo's health. He got hit with the puck last night. He was not out there late in that game. If Carlo's out, that's not good. Lindholm was mostly brutal last night again. And Brad Marchand, I don't know if he was sick last night. I don't know what was happening. But Marshy had 0 shots on goal. You need a lot more from him. He's been awesome in this series, but last night he was pretty much a non-factor. Not a single solitary shot on goal. Captain needs to stand up. All right, don't forget to sub to this channel. Trying to hit 3,500 subscriptions. That's the next goal. We're at about 3,200. Let's continue to push and try to improve that and build this community. Give us that thumbs up, subscribe. That's how we do that. Rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. This has been The Nick Cattle Show.